I'm thinking we should renovate the East Wing, Daniel announced, swirling his bourbon in the crystal tumbler I'd given him for our 5th anniversary. The autumn sunlight filtered through our bay windows, illuminating the imported Italian marble countertops that had cost more than most people's cars. I paused, coffee cup halfway to my lips. The East Wing? But we just redid it last year. That was your design, Claire, he replied, his voice carrying that dismissive tone I'd grown accustomed. Toso, it's too feminine. I'm thinking something more modern, more bold. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I bit back the retort dancing on my tongue. The East Wing renovation had been featured in Architectural Digest, but Daniel had been too busy to attend the photo shoot. Like he'd been too busy for many things over the last 3 years of our decade-long marriage. I see, I said instead, turning back to my laptop, where I was quietly reviewing the quarterly reports of Harrison Holdings, my family's company. The company that paid for this house, though Daniel conveniently forgot that fact whenever it didn't suit his narrative. I've already contacted some designers. They're coming by next week, he continued, checking his Rolex. Also a gift from me. Oh, and I need you to clear out your office by Thursday. Richard needs a space to work when he visits. Richard was Daniel's newest protege at the architectural firm where my husband was senior partner, a position he'd only secured after I'd introduced him to my father's extensive network of developers and investors. My office? I looked up, carefully keeping my expression neutral. Where am I supposed to work? Daniel waved his hand dismissively. You can use the sunroom. It's not like you need much space for your hobby. My hobby was managing the charitable foundation that distributed over $5 million annually to educational programs for underprivileged children, a foundation funded entirely by my family's company. I see, I repeated, closing my laptop, with deliberate care. And how long will Richard be staying? A few weeks, maybe a month. The Wellington project is in its critical phase. He drained his glass and set it down with a sharp clink. He's brilliant, Claire. Youngest architect to ever win the Pritzker Fellowship. The firm is lucky to have him. I nodded, already mentally cataloging what I would need to move. The sunroom leaked during heavy rains, but pointing that out would only lead to another lecture about my negativity. Will you be home for dinner tonight? I asked instead. Daniel checked his watch again, frowning. No, late meeting with the Wellington team. Don't wait up. This was our routine. The late meetings had started 2 years ago, around the same time the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume had begun clinging to his shirts. I'd stopped asking questions, stopped wondering. Our marriage had become a carefully choreographed dance of avoidance and politeness. Have a good day then, I said, rising to rinse my coffee cup in the sink. Daniel was already on his phone, fingers tapping rapidly as he headed for the door. He paused briefly, as if remembering something. Oh, and Claire? Tell Rosa to clean out the guest suite as well. Make sure the Egyptian cotton sheets are on the bed. The guest suite, adjacent to his office, on the opposite end of the house from our bedroom. Of course, I replied to the closing door. I stood in silence for a long moment, listening to the purr of his BMW as it rolled down our circular driveway. Then I picked up my phone. Eleanor? It's Claire. Can you come over? We need to talk. Eleanor Harrison had been my best friend since boarding school. Now she was also my father's right hand at Harrison Holdings, and the only person besides my parents who knew the full truth about my marriage. He's moving his mistress in? Eleanor's voice echoed in my kitchen 2 hours later. She paced back and forth, her tailored navy suit a sharp contrast to my casual attire. Into your house? And he wants you to prepare the guest suite? I sipped my tea, watching her indignation with a detached sort of amusement. I don't know for certain that Richard is his companion. He's a young architect from the firm. Eleanor stopped pacing to fix me with a look, Claire, you're brilliant with investment strategies and organizational logistics, but sometimes you're deliberately obtuse. Daniel hasn't touched your side of the closet in months. He's working late, 5 nights a week. And now he wants to move someone named Richard into the guest suite and renovate the East Wing to be less feminine? When she put it like that, it did seem rather obvious. "What are you going to do?" she asked, finally taking a seat across from me. I set down my teacup. "What would you suggest? Confront him? Create a scene? You know that's not my style." "No," Eleanor agreed, "but neither is being a doormat. Claire, you own this house. The deed is in your name. The mortgage-free status is courtesy of your trust fund. The art on these walls, the cars in the garage, including his precious BMW, all purchased with your money." "Our money," I corrected automatically. "We're married." Eleanor's eyebrow arched. "With an ironclad prenup that your father insisted on, thank God. A prenup that specifically states all properties owned prior to marriage remain separate assets." I sighed, running my finger around the rim of my cup. "It's not about the money, Ellie." "It never is with you," she conceded, her voice softening. "But he's taking advantage of you, has been for years. And now he's bringing his affair into your home and displacing you from your own office? Where does it end?" The question hung in the air between us. "Where indeed?" "I need time to think," I said finally. Eleanor reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Just promise me one thing. Don't move your office. Not yet. Give yourself a week." I nodded, though I wasn't sure what difference a week would make. That night, I sat in my office surrounded by the careful collection of a decade. Books on architecture and design that I'd studied to better understand Daniel's passion. Photographs of charity events and building inaugurations where I'd stood in the background while he took center stage. Awards for philanthropic work that he rarely acknowledged. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Stuck in meeting. Staying at the office tonight. See you tomorrow." The office, which had a perfectly serviceable couch in the conference room. Not a hotel, which would leave a credit card trail. Daniel had grown careful over the years, but not careful enough. I'd seen the charges for dinners I never attended, gifts I never received. Had I really become such a cliché? The wealthy wife, turning a blind eye to her husband's indiscretions to maintain the facade of a perfect marriage. My laptop pinged with an incoming email. The subject line read, "Preliminary plans. East Wing renovation." Curious, I opened it. It was from Daniel's work account, but clearly sent to me by mistake. The email contained a series of attachments labeled Wellington Residence, Phase 1, Wellington Residence Master Suite, and Wellington Residence Richard's Office. Wellington Residence. Our home had never been called that. It was Harrison House, named after my family, who had built it 3 generations ago. I clicked on the first attachment. The plans showed a complete gutting of the East Wing, not just redecorating, but structural changes. The master suite would be relocated. My office would become Richard's office. The sunroom wasn't even labeled. With growing disbelief, I opened the other attachments. Each revealed more extensive changes, transforming spaces I'd carefully curated. Over years, at the bottom of the email was a short exchange. "These look great. Claire won't be a problem. She never is." "Daniel, you sure? It's her house after all." "Richard, trust me. She has no idea what's in the deed. By the time she figures it out, it'll be too late." "Daniel, if you say so. Can't wait to make it ours." Richard. My hands were steady as I closed the laptop. Strangely steady, considering the ice-cold rage crystallizing in my chest. So, Daniel thought, I had no idea what was in the deed to my own family home. The home my grandfather had built, that my father had given to me on my 25th birthday. The home that had never, not for one moment, belonged to Daniel Harper. I reached for my phone again. "Eleanor, it's me. I need the Harrison Holdings legal team, tomorrow morning, and I need my father. William Harrison's private office at Harrison Holdings occupied the entire top floor of the building that bore his name. At 73, he still came to work daily, though he'd officially handed the CEO position to Eleanor 5 years earlier. My father had built his empire from the modest real estate company his father had started, expanding into development, technology investments, and hospitality. He looked up from his desk as I entered, his shrewd eyes missing nothing. "Claire," he said, rising to greet me with a kiss on the cheek. "Eleanor said it was urgent." "It is," I replied, taking the seat across from him. Eleanor was already there, along with Jared Mills, the head of Harrison Holdings' legal department. "Before we begin," my father said, settling back in his chair, "I want to know something. Are you finally ready to divorce that parasite you married?" I flinched. My father had never hidden his disapproval of Daniel, though he'd respected my choices, enough to keep it mostly private. "Dad, William," Eleanor cut in smoothly. "Let's hear Claire out first." I nodded gratefully to Eleanor and pulled out my laptop. "I need to show you something." For the next 20 minutes, I walked them through the email, the plans, the exchange between Daniel and Richard. With each revelation, my father's expression darkened. "He plans to renovate your house without consulting you?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "He believes I don't know what's in the deed," I explained. "That somehow he has a claim to Harrison House." Jared Mills adjusted his glasses. "He doesn't. The deed is clear. The property was gifted to you before marriage and protected by your prenuptial agreement. Additionally, all renovations have been paid for through your trust, maintaining the property's status as your separate asset." "Daniel seems to think otherwise," I said. My father leaned forward. "Claire, what exactly do you want to do here?" It was the question I'd been asking myself all night. What did I want? "I want to understand what he's planning," I said slowly. "He's been systematically pushing me out of my own home. First my office, then hinting I should use the sunroom instead. Now these renovation plans that don't even include a space for me." "He's not just having an affair," Eleanor said quietly. "He's trying to take your house." "That's impossible," Jared interjected. "Even if he's somehow contested the deed, which he can't. The prenup is watertight." "Unless," my father said thoughtfully, "he thinks he's found a loophole. Daniel's arrogant, not stupid. He wouldn't try this if he didn't believe he had some angle." I looked at the three of them, my father, my best friend, the lawyer who'd protected our family interests for decades. "I need to know what he's planning," I repeated. "And I need to stop him before he destroys my home." Eleanor exchanged a glance with my father. "We can help with that." My father nodded. "Jared, prepare the legal documents we discussed last year, the ones Claire refused to consider." I frowned. "What documents?" "Just options," my father said mildly, "in case you changed your mind about certain arrangements." Jared nodded and left the room. Eleanor's tablet pinged, and she glanced down at it. "Interesting," she murmured. "Daniel's firm just filed permits for major renovations at Harrison House. They're fast-tracking them through channels that bypass the historical preservation reviews normally required for properties in your neighborhood." "He can't file permits without the owner's consent," I said. Eleanor turned her tablet toward me. "According to this, he has it. There's a document with your signature." My blood ran cold. "That's impossible. I never signed anything." My father's expression was thunderous. "Forgery? Add that to the list, Jared," he called to the lawyer who had just re-entered the room. Jared handed me a folder. "These are the documents you requested last year, Mr. Harrison, and some additional options given the new developments." I opened the folder and scanned the contents. Divorce papers, property protection orders, and something else, a complex series. of documents transferring Harrison House into a family trust with very specific terms. "What is this?" I asked, holding up the trust document. "Insurance," my father replied. "Against exactly this kind of situation." I looked at him questioningly. "You've never wanted to leverage your financial position against Daniel," he explained. "You've insisted on maintaining the fiction that you're equals, despite the fact that his entire career has been built on your connections and your money. I respected that, even when I disagreed. But I also prepared for the day when you might need protection from him." I stared at the documents, a strange calm settling over me. What exactly would this do? It would place Harrison House in a family trust, with you as the primary beneficiary and trustee. Daniel would have no claim to it now or ever. Any attempt to renovate, modify, or even redecorate would require written approval from all trustees, you, me, and Eleanor. "It seems extreme," I said softly. "Is it?" Eleanor asked. "He's forging your signature on permits, Claire. He's planning to move his lover into your home and push you out. What's next?" I thought about the sunroom with its leaking roof, about being relegated to spaces Daniel deemed unimportant, about the systematic erasure of my presence from my own home. "When can this be executed?" I asked. My father's smile was thin. "It already has been. All it needs is your signature. I had it prepared months ago, after Daniel tried to take out a line of credit using the house as collateral." My head snapped. Up. "He did what?" "He was denied, of course," Eleanor said quickly. "The bank contacted us immediately. We handled it quietly." "Why wasn't I told?" I demanded. My father and Eleanor exchanged another look. "You were in Switzerland," my father said, carefully. "At that clinic." The clinic, where I'd spent 6 weeks recovering from what Daniel had characteristically called my latest disappointment, a second miscarriage that had nearly killed me. While I was fighting for my life, my husband had been attempting to leverage my family home for cash. "I see," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I picked up a pen and signed my name to the trust documents with deliberate care. "What happens now?" "Now," my father said, "we wait and see what Daniel does next. But we'll be ready." The waiting lasted exactly 3 days. I returned home from a foundation meeting to find a fleet of trucks parked in my driveway. Men in coveralls were carrying furniture, my furniture, out of the East Wing. I parked my car and walked calmly into the house, ignoring the curious glances from the workers. In the foyer, I found Daniel directing traffic, a tablet in hand. "Claire," he said, clearly surprised to see me. "You're home early." "Evidently," I replied, watching as 2 men struggled to remove the antique desk from my office, my grandmother's desk, passed down through generations of Harrison women. "What's happening here, Daniel?" "The renovation," he said smoothly, though I caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. "I told you about it last week." "You mentioned designers coming by," I corrected. "Not a complete gutting of the East Wing. That's my office they're emptying." Daniel's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We discussed this. You're moving to the sunroom, remember? Richard needs a proper workspace." "Richard," I repeated. "Your protégé from the firm? The one staying in the guest suite?" "That's right." Daniel glanced at his watch. "Actually, he should be arriving any minute. Why don't you go freshen up? You look tired." I ignored the barb. "Where is my furniture going?" "Storage, for now, until we decide what works with the new design." I watched as another piece of my heritage was carried past me. "And who is we in this scenario, Daniel?" A sleek black Audi pulled up the driveway, momentarily distracting him. A young man emerged, tall, slender, with artfully tousled dark hair and designer clothes that probably cost more than a junior architect should be able to afford. "Ah, there he is," Daniel said, his entire demeanor shifting. He straightened his tie and smoothed his hair in a gesture so telling it was almost comical. "Richard, welcome." I watched as Richard approached, noting the proprietary way his eyes scanned the house. My house. When his gaze landed on me, I saw a flicker of recognition, quickly masked. "Richard, this is Claire, my wife," Daniel said, the word wife carrying an inflection I hadn't heard in years. "Claire, this is Richard Wellington, the architectural genius I've been telling you about." Wellington, like the project name on those renovation plans. Not named after a client, but after Daniel's lover. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Harper," Richard said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, his smile confident. "Daniel has told me so much about you." "Has he?" I replied, my own smile perfectly pleasant. "How interesting. He's told me almost nothing about you." An awkward silence fell. Daniel cleared his throat. "Richard will be staying with us for a few weeks while we finalize the Wellington project. I've had the guest suite prepared for him." "The Wellington project," I repeated. "The one that's keeping you at the office so late?" Daniel's smile tightened. "Among others, we have several major projects in development." "I see." I turned to Richard. "And do all junior architects receive such personal attention from the senior partners at Harper & Associates?" Richard's confident smile faltered. "Claire," Daniel cut in sharply. "Richard is a special talent. The firm is investing in his development." "I'm sure they are," I murmured. I turned to go, then paused. "Oh, Daniel? Those men are about to take my grandmother's desk to storage. Please have them return it to my office immediately." "Claire, we discussed this. That space is being renovated for my office," I finished firmly. "Which it will remain. If Richard needs a workspace, he can use the conference room at the firm. That's what it's for, isn't it?" Daniel's expression darkened. "We can discuss this later." "There's nothing to discuss," I replied. "That desk stays, and so does my office. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have calls to make." I walked away, feeling their eyes on my back. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, soon to be only mine, I pulled out my phone and texted Eleanor. "It's happening. Richard has arrived. Time to implement Phase 1. Her reply came instantly. "Documents filed this morning. Confirmation coming within the hour. Stay strong." In our bedroom, I went to the closet and began methodically removing Daniel's things, placing them neatly in the suitcases he'd used for his last business trip, the trips that had grown more frequent over the past year, coinciding with Richard's arrival at the firm. My phone pinged with another message from Eleanor. Confirmation received. Harrison House Trust officially recorded. Daniel Harper has no legal claim as of 9:42 a.m. today. I sat on the edge of the bed, suitcases packed beside me, and waited for the inevitable confrontation. Through the window, I could see more workers arriving. A man in a hard hat was examining the exterior wall of the east wing, marking measurements on a clipboard. They were moving quickly. Too quickly for standard renovations. It was almost as if they were racing against something or someone. My phone rang. It was Jared Mills. "Mrs. Harper, we've received some concerning information. Your husband has filed for permits claiming to be the legal owner of the property. We've challenged this and put a stop work order on any renovations. But there's more. He's also applied for a substantial loan using the property as collateral." "How is that possible?" I asked. "He's not on the deed." "That's the concerning part," Jared said gravely. "The application includes a deed showing joint ownership, with your signature. The forgery Eleanor had mentioned. Not just for permits, but for financial fraud." "What do we do?" I asked. "We've already notified the authorities," Jared replied. "But given the circumstances, Mr. Harrison thought you might want to handle this privately, at least initially." I thought about Daniel downstairs, directing workers to dismantle my heritage, about Richard Wellington surveying my home like it was already his, about the sunroom with its leaking roof, where my husband thought I belonged. Tell my father I'll handle it, I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. And Jared? Thank you. I ended the call and stood, smoothing my skirt with steady hands. From my bedside drawer, I removed the file containing the original deed to Harrison House, along with the trust documents I'd signed 3 days ago. It was time to reclaim what was mine. Descending the stairs, I could hear Daniel and Richard speaking in low voices in the living room. They fell silent as I entered, Daniel's expression guarded, Richard's carefully blank. "Claire," Daniel began, his tone conciliatory. "I think we got off on the wrong foot. Richard and I were just discussing how we can make this transition smoother, for everyone." "Were you?" I placed the file on the coffee table between us. "That's interesting because I've been having similar discussions. With my father, and Harrison Holdings' legal team." Daniel's smile froze. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about forged documents, Daniel. Permit applications, loan applications, a falsified deed showing joint ownership of Harrison House." I opened the file, removing the original deed. "Perhaps you'd like to explain how your name appeared on this document when the only legitimate copy clearly shows sole ownership by Claire Elizabeth Harrison." The color drained from Daniel's face. Richard shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, suddenly very interested in his shoes. "Claire," Daniel said, his voice low and warning. "This isn't the time or place." "It's exactly the time and place," I cut him off. "In my home, which you have systematically attempted to take from me. The home you plan to renovate to accommodate your lover while relegating me to a leaking sunroom." Richard's head snapped up. "Leaking?" "Oh, yes," I said pleasantly. "Terrible draft, too. Practically unusable during winter. But according to the renovation plans you two devised, that's where I belong. Out of sight, while you transform my family home into the Wellington residence." Daniel stood abruptly. "You're being hysterical. Richard is a colleague. These renovations are for the benefit of the house." "Stop lying, Daniel." My voice was quiet but firm. "I saw the emails. I saw the plans. I know exactly what you were trying to do." "And what was that, Claire?" he challenged, desperation edging into his tone. "Improve a dated property? Create a modern space for entertaining clients? For God's sake, this place is a mausoleum to your family's past." "It's my heritage," I corrected. "One you've been happy to enjoy for the past decade, living in my mausoleum, driving cars purchased with my money, building a career on my family's connections." Richard stood suddenly. "I should go." "Sit down, Richard," I said, not unkindly. "You're as much a victim of Daniel's manipulations as I am. Did he tell you the house was his? That he had the right to offer you a place here?" Richard looked between us, confusion evident. He said you were having problems. That you were staying with your parents most of the time, and he was rattling around in this big house alone. I laughed softly, a sound devoid of humor. "I haven't stayed with my parents since college. I've been right here, in the home my grandfather built, watching my husband's increasingly transparent affair unfold while he plotted to take what was never his." Daniel's expression turned ugly. "You frigid bitch. You think I don't know what you're worth? What this house is worth? 10 years I've wasted, playing the dutiful husband to a woman who can't even give me children." The slap echoed in the silent room. Daniel's head snapped to the side, his cheek reddening with the imprint of my hand. "Get out," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "Both of you. Now." Richard was already moving, gathering his coat, clearly desperate to escape the imploding situation. Daniel didn't budge. "This is my house too. I've invested years." "You've invested nothing," I corrected, sliding another document from the file. "This is a copy of the Harrison House Trust, executed 3 days ago. The property is now held in trust, with myself, my father, and Eleanor Harrison as trustees. You have no claim to it, legal or otherwise. You can't do that, Daniel sputtered. We're married. Community property? Prenuptial agreement, I reminded him. The one you signed so eagerly, thinking you were protecting your modest architecture practice from my family's grasping hands. The one that clearly states all properties owned prior to marriage remain separate assets. Daniel's face contorted with rage. I'll contest it. I'll sue you, your father, the whole damn Harrison empire. On what grounds? I asked calmly. The forged documents? The fraudulent loan applications? The permits filed under false pretenses? Please, go ahead. I'm sure the district attorney would be very interested in your explanation. Richard had backed all the way to the door, watching the exchange with growing horror. Daniel, he said urgently, we should go. Now. But Daniel wasn't listening. He advanced on me, his face a mask of fury. You think you're so clever. Don't. You? Hiding behind Daddy's lawyers and money. You're nothing without the Harrison name. Nothing. I held my ground, meeting his rage with icy calm. And you're nothing without it either, Daniel. How many of your clients came through my father's connections? How many projects were funded by Harrison Investments? Even your precious partnership. At the firm? Do you think you earned that on talent alone? Daniel's hands clenched at his sides. For a moment, I thought he might strike me. Instead, he spun around, grabbing a crystal vase, a wedding gift from my mother, and hurled it against the wall, where it shattered spectacularly. Daniel! Richard gasped, shocked. I didn't flinch. You have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings. After that, security will escort you from the premises. Any items left behind will be delivered to your office. You can't just throw me out. I'm your husband. You stopped being my husband the moment you decided to move your lover into my home, I replied evenly. The divorce papers are in the file, as well. You'll find them quite generous considering the circumstances. Daniel snatched up the file, rifling through it with trembling hands. His face paled as he read the terms. This is nothing. A pittance. It's exactly what you're entitled to under the prenup you signed, I said. Plus a severance payment, if you will, in exchange for a quiet, uncontested divorce with a comprehensive NDA. Fight me on this, Daniel, and you'll get nothing except a very public exposure of your fraud and attempted theft. Richard had edged all the way out into the foyer. I'll wait in the car, he mumbled, practically running for the door. Daniel watched him go, then turned back to me, his anger giving way to calculation. We can work this out, Claire. We've had 10 years together. That counts for something. It counted for everything, I agreed quietly. Until you decided it didn't. 1 hour, Daniel. The clock is ticking. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing amid the shards of crystal and the ruins of the life he'd tried to steal from me. Through the window, I could see Richard pacing beside his Audi, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing frantically. My own phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Security team en route. ETA 20 minutes. Are you safe? I typed back. Yes. Daniel is collecting his things. Richard is waiting outside. Keep security discreet until needed. As I watched from my bedroom window, Daniel emerged 45 minutes later, carrying 2 suitcases, the ones I'd already packed for him. He threw them into the trunk of his BMW, exchanged tense words with Richard, then climbed into the driver's seat. Richard hesitated, looking back at the house once more before getting into his own car. The 2 vehicles pulled away, gravel crunching under their tires. The workers had already departed, leaving half-empty moving trucks and partially disassembled furniture in their wake. My phone rang. It was my father. Is it done? He asked without preamble. Yes, I replied, watching the last glimpse of Daniel's car disappear down the winding driveway. He's gone. And the Wellington boy? Richard? Gone too. Though I think he was more deceived than deceiver. My father grunted, unconvinced. The security team will remain in place for the next 72 hours. Eleanor is handling the legal notifications to Daniel's firm about the fraudulent permits and loan applications. Will charges be filed? I asked, feeling suddenly exhausted now that the confrontation was over. That's up to you, my father said. But Claire, he tried to steal your home, your heritage. That's not something we can simply overlook. I know, I whispered, looking around the bedroom I'd shared with a man who had been plotting to erase me from my own life. I just need time to think. Take all the time you need, my father said, his voice softening. The house is secure. You are secure. Everything else can wait. I ended the call and sank onto the edge of the bed, emotions finally catching up to me, not grief for my marriage. That had been dying by inches for years. Not even anger at Daniel's betrayal. That had been brewing beneath the surface for longer than I cared to admit. No, what I felt was something entirely different. Relief. And beneath that, something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Possibility. I was Claire Elizabeth Harrison, sole owner of Harrison House. And for the first time in 10 years, its future, and mine, belonged entirely to me. Outside, the security team my father had dispatched was taking up discreet positions around the property. Inside, I began the slow process of reclaiming my space, piece by piece, starting with my grandmother's desk, which would be returned to my office where it belonged. This was just the beginning. Daniel might be gone, but I knew him well enough to know he wouldn't accept defeat easily. He would be back, with lawyers and threats and demands. Let him come. I would be ready. After all, this was my house, my rules. And Daniel Harper was about to learn exactly what it meant to underestimate a Harrison. The morning after Daniel's departure dawned with an unusual stillness. For the first time in years, I woke without the pretense of a functioning marriage hanging over me. No need to prepare Daniel's preferred breakfast. No need to filter my words. No need to make myself smaller to accommodate his ego. I padded downstairs in my robe, noting the empty spaces where the moving crew had begun removing furniture before, being halted. The shards of crystal from the vase Daniel had shattered still littered the entryway floor, evidence of his final tantrum. Mrs. Harper? I turned to find Marcus, the head of the security team my father had dispatched, standing respectfully in the doorway. Ms. Harrison, I corrected automatically. It was time I reclaimed my name along with my home. Just Claire is fine, though. He nodded. Ms. Harrison, we've secured the perimeter. My team will maintain shifts for the next 72 hours as directed. I should inform you that Mr. Harper has attempted to return twice during the night. My eyebrows rose. Twice? Yes, ma'am. Once. At approximately 11:30 p.m., and again at 2:15 a.m. Both times he appeared to be under the influence. We denied him entry as instructed. Thank you, Marcus. Did he cause any trouble? Nothing we couldn't handle, Marcus replied with professional detachment. Though he did make certain accusations regarding your mental state. He claimed to be concerned for your welfare. Of course he did. Daniel was nothing if not predictable. When charm failed, he would resort to painting me as unstable or irrational, a tactic he'd employed increasingly over the years. I'm perfectly well, as you can see, I said with a small smile, though I appreciate the concern. Yes, ma'am. Also, a Ms. Eleanor Harrison called to say she'll be arriving at 9 with the restoration team. She asked if you wanted breakfast. Delivered. I glanced at the ornate grandfather clock in the hallway. It was barely 7. Tell her yes, please, and have someone clean up this glass. I retreated to my office, my rightfully reclaimed office, and settled behind my grandmother's desk. The movers had only managed to remove the smaller items before, being stopped, but even those absences were keenly felt. I made a mental note to inventory everything that had been taken. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Incoming. Daniel's lawyer called ours this morning, demanding an emergency hearing for re-entry to his residence. I sighed. Faster than I'd expected, but not surprising. I typed back, "On what grounds?" Her reply came swiftly. "Claiming cohabitation establishes joint tenancy regardless of deed, also threatening domestic violence charges for forcible eviction. If he's not allowed back in immediately?" I nearly laughed out loud. Daniel claiming domestic violence? The man who had spent years systematically belittling me, who had attempted to relegate me to a leaking sunroom while installing his lover. In our home? "What does Jared say?" I asked, referring to our family's attorney. "That he's grasping at straws. The trust is ironclad. But Daniel's lawyer is making noise about your mental instability and erratic behavior following your medical troubles last year." The miscarriage. He was using my physical and emotional trauma as a weapon. Something cold and hard crystallized in my chest. "Tell Jared to release the emails," I replied. Eleanor's response was immediate. "Are you sure? Once we go nuclear, there's no going back." I stared at my phone, considering. The emails between Daniel and Richard discussing the renovation plans, and more damningly, their explicit conversations about pushing me out of my own home, would destroy any credibility Daniel might have. They would also expose Richard's role in the scheme, potentially damaging his budding career. "Not yet," I amended. "Let's see what their next move is. But prepare the evidence package just in case." At precisely 9 o'clock, Eleanor arrived with what she cheerfully called the restoration team, a small army of interior designers, contractors, and security experts, all discreetly employed by Harrison Holdings. "You look better than I expected," she observed, handing me a cappuccino from my favorite cafe as we surveyed the half-dismantled East Wing. "I feel better than I expected," I admitted. "There's something oddly liberating about finally acknowledging what your marriage has become." Eleanor nodded sagely. "Speaking of which, you should know that Daniel has been on quite the smear campaign this morning. He's called 3 board members of your foundation, your doctor, and even attempted to reach your mother in Paris." I nearly choked on my coffee. "My mother? What on earth for?" "Apparently to express grave concerns about your mental health and to suggest that perhaps someone from your family should check on you as you're having another episode." Another episode. As if my grief over losing pregnancies had been some form of mental breakdown, rather than a normal human response to loss. "Fortunately," Eleanor continued, "your mother immediately called your father, who filled her in. She's cutting her trip short and will be home tomorrow." I hadn't expected that. My mother, Catherine Harrison, was a formidable woman in her own right, an internationally renowned art curator whose exhibitions were planned years in advance. For her to alter her schedule was unprecedented. "That's not necessary," I protested. "I'm perfectly fine handling this myself." Eleanor gave me a knowing look. "It's not about whether you can handle it, Claire. It's about showing a united front, the Harrisons closing ranks." As if summoned by her words, my phone rang with my father's distinctive ringtone. "Claire," he began without preamble. "Daniel's trying to access the Harrison Holdings accounts." My blood ran cold. "What? How?" "Claiming he has joint authority as your spouse. Tried to withdraw a rather substantial sum from the foundation's operating account. Fortunately, Monica at First Federal recognized the irregularity and contacted me directly. Monica Jensen had been our family's private banker for decades. Another relationship Daniel had attempted to exploit. "This is getting out of hand," I murmured, watching as the restoration team began carefully returning displaced furniture to its proper location. "What's he trying to accomplish?" "My guess? He's desperate," my father replied. "The man just lost his meal ticket and his facade of success in one fell swoop. He's scrambling. Should we be worried?" "About the money?" "No. I've already locked everything down. About Daniel himself?" My father paused. "Possibly. Desperate men do desperate things, Claire. That security team stays in place until this is resolved. After we hung up, I joined Eleanor in the living room where she was directing the placement of a restored antique settee. Daniel's trying to access the foundation accounts, I informed her quietly. She nodded, unsurprised. I expected as much. That's why I had all the accounts frozen this morning, except for the operational essentials. Nothing will go through without dual authentication from both you and your father. I looked at her with new appreciation. Eleanor had always been efficient, but her foresight in this situation was impressive. Thank you, I said simply. She squeezed my arm. That's what best friends are for. Now let's talk about the real issue. Daniel still has keys to the house. Marcus changed the locks last night, I assured her. Electronic access? The security? System? I hesitated. I don't know if he has the codes. Eleanor was already tapping on her tablet. We'll have the entire system replaced today. No chances. By noon, the house was humming with activity. The restoration team had made significant progress returning the East Wing to its former state. The security system company was installing a state-of-the-art replacement and a discreet forensic accounting. Team was combing through 10 years of financial records, looking for any other irregularities Daniel might have engineered. I was reviewing their preliminary findings in my office when Marcus appeared at the door. Ms. Harrison, Mr. Harper is at the gate again, with his attorney this time. I exchanged a glance with Eleanor, who had been working alongside me. What exactly does he want? He's demanding entry to collect personal property of significant value. His attorney is citing some statute about personal effects. What personal effects? I asked incredulously. He took his clothes and personal items yesterday. He specifically mentioned art and collectibles, Marcus replied. Claims they were purchased with his separate funds. I nearly laughed. The only art in our home, in my home, were Harrison family pieces and works I'd acquired through my mother's connections in the art world. Daniel couldn't tell a Monet from a Manet. Record the interaction, I instructed. Tell them that any legitimate personal property can be itemized and submitted to our attorneys for verification and return. Marcus nodded and retreated. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Art and collectibles? She repeated skeptically. He's fishing, I replied, turning back to the financial records. Looking for anything he can claim as his. Well, he's about to be disappointed. These preliminary reports show he hasn't contributed a dime to household expenses in nearly 3 years. Everything from the mortgage, which was paid off 5 years ago anyway, to the utilities to the gardener has come directly from your accounts. I wasn't surprised. Daniel had been gradually shifting financial responsibilities to me throughout our marriage, always with plausible excuses. His firm was reinvesting profits. He was between major projects. The tax burden this quarter was unexpected. I'd enabled it all, telling myself it was what partners did, support each other through lean times. Except Daniel's lean times had mysteriously coincided with his rising profile and increasingly lavish personal expenditures. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, Mr. Harper becoming agitated, making threats about exposing family secrets if not allowed entry. Family secrets? What secrets did Daniel imagine the Harrisons harbored? Maintain position, I texted back. If he becomes aggressive, call the police. Daniel's making vague threats. About exposing family secrets, I told Eleanor, who snorted derisively. What secrets? Your father's fondness for those hideous plaid golf pants. Your mother's secret addiction to reality TV shows. The Harrisons are boringly above board, which is why they've stayed wealthy for generations. She had a point. My family had its quirks, but nothing remotely scandalous by modern standards. Another text from Marcus. Mr. Harper and attorney departing. Says, this isn't over. Of course it isn't, I murmured. Eleanor glanced at her watch. The locksmith should be finished by now. Want to do a security walkthrough? We were halfway through the inspection when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Claire Harrison, I answered. having already decided to reclaim my maiden name in all aspects of my life. Ms. Harrison, this is Detective Walsh with the County Police. I'm calling regarding a wellness check requested by your husband, Daniel Harper. I closed my eyes briefly, tamping down my irritation. I'm perfectly well, Detective, as I'm sure you can hear. Yes, ma'am. Protocol requires that we follow up on these requests, especially given Mr. Harper's concerns about your mental state following medical difficulties. So Daniel had taken his performance to the police. Predictable, yet still infuriating. I understand, Detective. Would you like to come verify my wellness in person? I'm happy to accommodate. There was a brief pause. That won't be necessary, ma'am. Mr. Harper also mentioned concerns about being denied access to his residence. This residence belongs solely to me, I replied calmly. It's been in my family for generations and is currently held in the Harrison Family Trust. Mr. Harper has no legal claim to it, as his attorneys have no doubt discovered by now. As for his personal belongings, he was given ample opportunity to collect them, and arrangements can be made through our respective lawyers for anything he may have forgotten. Another pause. I see. And the allegations of, mental instability are false and potentially defamatory, I said firmly. I've recently discovered my husband's infidelity and financial improprieties, Detective. His accusations are clearly retaliatory. I'd be happy to provide documentation from my doctors confirming my sound mental health, though I find the request invasive and inappropriate. That won't be necessary, Ms. Harrison. Thank you for clarifying the situation. After ending the call, I turned to Eleanor with a sigh. Daniel's reported me to the police for a wellness check. He's claiming I'm mentally unstable. Eleanor's expression darkened. That's low, even for him. It's desperate, I corrected. And entirely expected. He's lost control of the narrative, and he's flailing. Still, Eleanor said thoughtfully, we should get ahead of this. If he's willing to involve the police, he might try other avenues. Medical intervention, perhaps. A chill ran through me. You think he'd try to have me committed, or something equally dramatic? I think he's a man who's lost access to a very comfortable lifestyle and substantial resources. There's no telling what he might attempt. Eleanor was already tapping on her tablet. I'm having Dr. Matthews prepare a current psychological evaluation confirming your stable mental health. Better safe than sorry. Dr. Matthews had been the therapist who helped me through the aftermath of my miscarriages. She knew better than anyone how Daniel's behavior had contributed to my stress during that period. By late afternoon, the house was secured with new locks and a cutting-edge security system. The restoration team had made remarkable progress, erasing most signs of Daniel's attempted renovations. My office was fully restored, my grandmother's desk back in its rightful place. I was just settling in to review more financial documents when a notification popped up on my computer screen. Someone was attempting to access my personal email account from an unrecognized device. Eleanor, I called, staring at the screen in disbelief. She hurried in, taking in the situation at a glance. Is that Daniel trying to hack my email? Yes. I watched as the security protocols kicked in, blocking the attempt. How desperate is he? Eleanor's expression was grim. Desperate enough to commit computer crimes, apparently. Let me call our IT security team. While she stepped out to make the call, I sat back in my chair, truly disturbed for the first time. Daniel's behavior was escalating beyond what I'd anticipated. The man I'd married was calculating and sometimes manipulative, but this frantic, scattershot approach to regaining control was unexpected. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you've won, but you have no idea what's coming. I built that life too. It's mine as much as yours. Daniel. Using a new number to bypass my blocks. I showed the message to Eleanor when she returned. Her jaw tightened. That's it. I'm calling Vincent. Vincent Chen was the head of Harrison Holdings. Private investigation team. A resource my father maintained was essential for a family with significant wealth and business interests. I'd always found his existence slightly paranoid, but now I was grateful. "Is that really necessary?" I asked, though with less conviction than I might have had that morning. "Claire, he's escalating," Eleanor said firmly. "Email hacking, police, reports, threatening texts. These aren't the actions of someone who's going to gracefully accept defeat." She was right, of course. Daniel's pride had been injured, his plans thwarted, his comfortable lifestyle threatened. Men like Daniel didn't simply walk away from such losses. Vincent arrived within the hour, a slight, unassuming man who belied his reputation as one of the most effective private investigators on the East Coast. "Ms. Harrison," he greeted me with a respectful nod. "I understand you're experiencing some difficulties with your estranged husband." "That's putting it mildly," Eleanor interjected, showing him the threatening text message. "He's also attempted to access personal email accounts, made false reports to the police, and tried to withdraw foundation funds." Vincent absorbed this information without reaction. "Has he made any specific threats of physical harm?" "Not explicitly," I admitted. "It's more implied." "And this Richard Wellington, the architect, where does he stand in all this?" I hesitated. "I'm not entirely sure. He seemed genuinely surprised to learn the truth about the house ownership. Daniel may have misled him as much as he tried to manipulate me." Vincent made a note. "I'd like to establish surveillance on both of them, with your permission. Standard protocol in these situations, documentation of movements, communications, potential escalation indicators." It felt extreme, but the day's events had left me shaken. "If you think it's necessary, better to have information we don't need than to need information we don't have," Vincent replied mildly. "I'll also assign personal security for you when you leave the property. Discreet, but effective." After Vincent departed to make arrangements, I found myself standing in what had been Daniel's home office, now stripped of his presence. The room felt larger somehow, as if his ego had physically occupied space. Eleanor appeared in the doorway. "Your mother's flight lands at 8 tomorrow. Morning. Your father's sending the car." I nodded absently, running my fingers along the empty bookshelves where Daniel's architectural reference books had been displayed. Books I'd purchased for him over the years, carefully selected to support his career and interests. Had any of it been real? Or had I simply been a convenient stepping stone for his ambitions? "Claire," Eleanor said gently, "you should rest. It's been an overwhelming day." "I can't stop thinking about Richard," I admitted. Was he just a pawn in Daniel's game? Or an active participant? "Does it matter?" Eleanor asked pragmatically. "Either way, he was willing to move into another woman's home, your home, under false pretenses." She had a point. Whether Richard had been fully informed or partially deceived, he'd been willing to participate in the fiction Daniel had created. My phone chimed with an email notification. It was from our family lawyer, Jared Mills Clare, Daniel's attorney. "Has formally requested an emergency hearing for temporary re-entry to the Harrison House property, citing substantial financial interests and jointly acquired assets remaining on the premises. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. I've prepared our response based on the trust documents and prenuptial agreement. Given the nature of his claims, I recommend we also present evidence of the fraudulent permit applications and attempted financial improprieties. Please call me in the morning to discuss strategy. Regards, Jared." I showed the email to Eleanor, who read it with narrowed eyes. "Substantial financial interests?" she repeated incredulously. "The man hasn't contributed a dime to this household in years. What financial interest could he possibly claim?" I thought about the art on the walls, the antiques carefully collected. Over generations, the renovations paid for entirely from my trust fund. "He's desperate," I said again, the phrase becoming a refrain. and desperate people make despicable choices. I spent the evening reviewing financial records with the forensic accounting team, discovering patterns that should have been obvious years ago. Small withdrawals from joint accounts that added up to substantial sums. Credit card charges for restaurants I'd never visited, hotels in cities Daniel claimed to be visiting for work conferences, gifts I'd never received. The evidence of his infidelity and his financial exploitation was overwhelming once I allowed myself to see it. By midnight, the house was quiet. The security team maintained their positions outside, changing shifts with military precision. The restoration team had departed, promising to return in the morning to complete the work. Eleanor had reluctantly gone home after extracting a promise that I would call immediately if anything concerning occurred. Alone in my bedroom now, not ours, I changed into pajamas and prepared for bed, trying to process the whirlwind my life had become in just 48 hours. My phone buzzed with one final email notification for the day. From Richard Wellington. I hesitated before opening it, unsure what the young architect could possibly have to say that I'd want to hear. Ms. Harrison, I want to apologize for my role in what must have been a deeply painful situation for you. I was not fully aware of the circumstances regarding your home or your marriage, though that's no excuse for my actions. Daniel represented our relationship and his marital situation very differently than the reality I witnessed yesterday. While this doesn't absolve me of responsibility, I want you to know that I never would have participated had I understood the truth. I've severed all personal and professional ties with Daniel, effective immediately, and have tendered my resignation at the firm. I will cooperate fully with any legal proceedings if needed, though I hope it doesn't come to that. Again, my sincere apologies for any pain I've caused. Richard Wellington. I read the email twice, trying to gauge its sincerity. It seemed genuine, the awkward, formal language of someone deeply embarrassed and attempting to make amends without making excuses. Whether it was true remorse or simply self-preservation in the face of potential professional consequences, I couldn't be sure. But it was something, an acknowledgement of wrongdoing that Daniel would never offer. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say that wouldn't either absolve him too easily or condemn him too harshly. Instead, I forwarded the email to Vincent Chen, adding to the growing documentation of the situation. As I finally lay down to sleep, my phone buzzed one last time. Another text from Daniel's new number. You think this is over because you have Daddy's lawyers and money? Tomorrow everyone will know the truth about Perfect Claire Harrison. Sleep well. I stared at the ceiling, wondering what truth Daniel imagined he possessed. Whatever it was, I would face it tomorrow. With my family behind me, with the law on my side, with the truth, the actual truth, as my shield. Let him come, with his desperate accusations and empty threats. I was Claire Elizabeth Harrison, and I had spent too many years making myself small to accommodate Daniel Harper's ego. Those days were over. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The court, hearing, my mother's return, whatever desperate scheme Daniel was concocting in his wounded pride. But tonight, in this house that was finally indisputably mine alone, I would rest. And tomorrow, I would rise ready to reclaim not just my home, but my identity, my voice, and my future. Whatever Daniel planned to throw at me, I would be ready. Morning arrived with a flurry of activity. I had barely finished my first cup of coffee when the doorbell rang, heralding my mother's arrival a full hour earlier than expected. Catherine Harrison swept into the foyer with the unmistakable presence that had intimidated museum boards and charmed billionaire art collectors for decades. At 68, she remained a striking woman, tall and slim like me, with silver hair cut in a precise bob that framed her elegant features. "Claire," she said, embracing me tightly. "I came as soon as I could." "You didn't need to cut your trip short," I protested, though I was secretly relieved to see her. "I have everything under control." My mother held me at arm's length, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "So I see. You look better than I expected." I laughed softly. "That's exactly what Eleanor said yesterday." "Great minds," my mother replied with a small smile. "Now show me what that weasel tried to do to my family's home." I led her through the house, pointing out where Daniel had begun the renovations and explaining his grand plans to transform Harrison House into the Wellington residence. My mother's expression grew increasingly thunderous. "The audacity," she murmured, trailing her fingers along the antique wainscoting Daniel had marked for removal. "Your grandfather commissioned this from Italian craftsmen in 1952. It's irreplaceable." Daniel never cared about the history, I admitted. He called it dated and stuffy, said no one designed homes this way anymore. "No one has the skill or patience anymore," my mother corrected. "That's why these homes are invaluable. Heritage can't be replicated or mass-produced, no matter how talented today's architects think they are." We ended the tour in my office, now fully restored to its former state. My mother settled into one of the visitor chairs while I took my place behind my grandmother's desk. "Your father told me everything," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "The forged documents, the loans, the attempt to push you to the sunroom." I nodded, surprising myself with how clinical I could be about it now. Daniel saw an opportunity and took it. He's been positioning himself for this for years. I just didn't want to see it. "Don't," my mother said sharply. "Don't take blame for his betrayal. You trusted your husband, as you should have been able to do. His actions are his alone." There was wisdom in her words, though it was still difficult to fully absolve myself of responsibility. I had ignored signs, made excuses, enabled his gradual takeover of my life. "The court hearing is at 2, I said, changing the subject. "Jared thinks Daniel will try to claim he has financial interests in the house despite the prenup." My mother snorted delicately. "On what grounds? The man hasn't contributed meaningfully to anything except his own wardrobe since the day you married him. Jared thinks he'll claim sweat equity, that his design expertise and professional connections enhance the property value." "His design expertise," my mother repeated with disdain. "The man wanted to tear out century-old craftsmanship and replace it with whatever sterile modernist nonsense is currently fashionable. If anything, he's decreased the property's historical value." Before I could respond, my phone rang with Jared's number. "Claire," he began without preamble. "We have a situation. Daniel's attorney has just filed an amended emergency motion. He's now claiming that you're mentally incompetent to manage your own affairs due to profound and untreated depression following reproductive failures." The blood drained from my face. "He's using my miscarriages against me?" My mother's head snapped up, her eyes flashing with rage. "It gets worse," Jared continued grimly. "He's requesting temporary conservatorship over your financial affairs, claiming you've been making erratic and irrational decisions that threaten your estate. He's submitted affidavits from 2 doctors suggesting you require psychiatric evaluation." "What doctors?" I demanded. "I've never been treated for any psychiatric condition. One is a Dr. Elliot Benson. The other is Dr. Thomas Webb, both psychiatrists." I shook my head, bewildered. "I've never heard of either of them." My mother was already on her tablet, fingers flying across the screen. "Elliot Benson," she murmured. "Specializes in reproductive trauma and grief counseling. Thomas Webb. Primarily geriatric psychiatry and competency evaluations." She looked up, eyes narrowed. "Neither has ever treated you." "How could they possibly submit affidavits about my mental state?" I asked, struggling to make sense of this latest attack. "They've phrased them carefully," Jared explained. "Based on case presentation and symptomatology as described by the spouse. Essentially, Daniel has described your supposed symptoms to these doctors, who have then provided hypothetical assessments. That can't be legal, I said. It's certainly unethical, Jared agreed. But in emergency conservatorship hearings, courts sometimes accept preliminary assessments pending full evaluation. Daniel's trying to buy time and gain temporary control. My mother was incandescent with rage. This is beyond despicable even for him. Using Claire's reproductive trauma as a weapon? It gets us in front of a judge today, Jared said pragmatically, which means we can present our evidence of Daniel's forgery and financial improprieties immediately, rather than waiting for a later hearing date. What do we need to do? I asked, forcing myself to focus on solutions rather than the burning betrayal of Daniel using my most painful experiences against me. Dr. Matthews needs to appear in person, Jared replied. Her testimony as your actual treating therapist will carry significant weight. We also need medical records from your gynecologist confirming that your physical recovery was complete and uncomplicated. My mother was already making calls, her voice crisp and authoritative as she arranged for the necessary documentation to be expedited. Claire, Jared continued, his voice gentler, I need to ask you directly. Is there anything in your medical history that Daniel could potentially distort? Any medication, any therapy, any moments of understandable emotional distress that he might twist into something more sinister? I thought carefully. After the second miscarriage, I was prescribed a mild anti-anxiety medication for a few weeks, and I saw Dr. Matthews weekly for several months. But I was never hospitalized for psychiatric reasons, never diagnosed with clinical depression, never considered self-harm. Good. And have you been taking any medication recently? Anything that might show up in a drug test if one were ordered? No, nothing, I assured him. I haven't needed medication in over a year. Excellent. One more thing. Daniel is claiming you've been erratic and paranoid, citing your decision to change the locks and hire security as evidence of deteriorating mental state. I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. After he tried to move his lover into my home, after he forged my signature on loan documents, after he hacked my email and sent threatening messages, those actions seem perfectly rational to me. To any reasonable person, yes, Jared agreed. But we need to be prepared for him to paint you as overreacting to a simple marital dispute. By noon, my father had arrived, completing the family fortress around me. He embraced me tightly, his familiar cologne bringing unexpected comfort. I've spoken to Judge Carson, he said without preamble. Not about the case specifics, he added quickly, noting Jared's raised eyebrow, but to ensure he's aware of potential ethical concerns regarding the psychiatric affidavits. Julian Carson had been my father's classmate at Yale Law before transitioning to the bench. Their friendship had sparked occasional accusations of influence over the years, though my father had always been scrupulous about maintaining appropriate boundaries. William, my mother cautioned, we need to be careful about any appearance of what, Catherine? My father interrupted. Of protecting our daughter from a predator using the legal system as a weapon? I simply reminded Julian of the Harrison family's long-standing reputation for integrity and Daniel's recent suspicious financial activities. The facts speak for themselves. Eleanor arrived next, carrying a sleek portfolio containing what she called the nuclear option. Complete documentation of Daniel's financial improprieties, communications with Richard about renovating the house, and evidence of his attempts to access Harrison Holdings accounts after being removed from the property. We shouldn't need all of this, Jared cautioned as we reviewed the materials. The conservatorship request is so obviously retaliatory that the judge should dismiss it outright once Dr. Matthews testifies. Better to have it and not need it, Eleanor replied, echoing Vincent Chen's philosophy from the previous day. As we prepared to leave for the courthouse, Vincent himself called with an update that left me momentarily speechless. Daniel spent the night at the Madison Hotel with a woman who was not Richard Wellington, he reported. We have documentation. I put the call on speaker so the others could hear. Not Richard? Who then? Her name is Sophia Verlaine. She's a paralegal at Daniel's law firm's office. Based on our preliminary research, they've been meeting regularly for approximately 4 months. I exchanged incredulous looks with my mother and Eleanor. So Richard wasn't his only companion? Apparently not, Vincent confirmed. We're still gathering information, but it appears Mr. Harper has been quite busy socially while claiming to work late. After ending the call, I sat heavily in my chair. He had multiple affairs going simultaneously, and still had the audacity to try to move one of his lovers into my home. My father's expression was grim. The man has no shame. But this might actually help us today. It further undermines his credibility. The drive to the courthouse was tense. Our small convoy of black town cars drawing curious glances as we pulled up to the entrance. News of the emergency hearing had apparently leaked. Several journalists were gathered on the courthouse steps, though they seemed uncertain who they were looking for. That changed the moment my mother stepped out of the lead car. Catherine Harrison was instantly recognizable from years of society photographs and arts coverage. A ripple of excitement went through the small crowd as cameras began clicking. "Mrs. Harrison! Over here! Catherine! Is it true your daughter's marriage is ending?" My mother ignored them with practiced ease, creating a protective barrier as I emerged behind her. Eleanor flanked my other side while my father and Jared followed closely. Together, we ascended the steps in formation, a united front of Harrison dignity. Inside, we were directed to Courtroom C, where Daniel was already waiting with his attorney. A sharply dressed man I recognized as Maxwell Thornton, known for handling high-profile divorces for wealthy clients. Daniel himself looked polished but strained, the confident facade undermined by the tension visible in his jaw and the darkness under his eyes. Our eyes met briefly across the room. His gaze held no warmth, no regret, only calculation and simmering anger. I turned away, focusing instead on arranging my documents on our table. Dr. Matthews arrived moments before the hearing was called to order, slipping into the seat beside me with a reassuring smile. "I brought everything," she whispered, patting her weathered leather briefcase. "Complete treatment records, contemporaneous notes, and my professional assessment of your current mental state." Judge Carson entered, a tall man with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes. He surveyed the courtroom briefly before taking his seat. "We're here on the matter of Harper versus Harrison Harper," he began, reviewing the documents before him. "Mr. Thornton, I understand your client is seeking an emergency temporary conservatorship over Ms. Harrison Harper's financial affairs, citing concerns about her mental competency. Is that correct?" Maxwell Thornton rose smoothly. "That is correct. Your Honor, my client has observed increasingly erratic behavior from his wife following significant reproductive trauma. He's deeply concerned for her well-being and the protection of their marital assets." "Marital assets," Judge Carson repeated, peering over his reading glasses. "I see from these documents that the property in question, Harrison House, is owned solely by Ms. Harrison Harper and has been in her family for generations. Is that disputed?" "Your Honor, while the deed may be in Ms. Harrison Harper's name, my client has contributed substantially to the property's upkeep and value through his professional expertise as an architect. Furthermore, as her husband, he has established tenancy rights regardless of the deed." Judge Carson turned to Jared. "Mr. Mills, your response?" Jared stood. "Your Honor, this emergency petition is a transparent attempt by Mr. Harper to gain control of assets that are indisputably separate property under the prenuptial agreement both parties signed. As for Ms. Harrison's mental state, we have her treating therapist present to testify to her sound mind and emotional stability." The judge nodded. "Let's address the mental competency issue first, as that's the basis for the emergency petition. Mr. Thornton, you've submitted affidavits From Dr. Elliot Benson and Dr. Thomas Webb suggesting Ms. Harrison Harper requires psychiatric evaluation. Have either of these doctors ever treated or even met Ms. Harrison Harper? Thornton shifted slightly. Not directly, Your Honor. They've provided professional opinions based on symptomatology as described by Mr. Harper, who has lived with Ms. Harrison Harper for 10 years and observed her behavior firsthand. Judge Carson's expression remained neutral, but his tone sharpened. So these are essentially second-hand assessments based solely on Mr. Harper's descriptions. With respect, Your Honor, spousal observations are often critical in identifying concerning patterns of behavior. Mr. Harper has witnessed Ms. Harrison Harper's decline following her second miscarriage, including periods of withdrawal, emotional volatility, and most recently, paranoid behavior, changing locks, hiring security guards, and making unfounded accusations. I felt my cheeks burn at having my private pain dissected so clinically, but I kept my expression composed. Dr. Matthews reached under the table to squeeze my hand briefly in support. Judge Carson turned to our table. Mr. Mills, does Ms. Harrison Harper have a treating mental health professional who can address these concerns directly? Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Elizabeth Matthews has been Ms. Harrison Harper's therapist for the past 2 years. She's prepared to testify regarding Ms. Harrison Harper's mental state. The judge nodded. Dr. Matthews, please approach and be sworn in. What followed was 20 minutes of the most professionally devastating testimony I could have imagined Daniel enduring. Dr. Matthews, with her 30 years of clinical experience and unimpeachable credentials, systematically dismantled every claim about my mental state. Ms. Harrison has demonstrated remarkable resilience throughout extremely difficult circumstances, she testified. Far from exhibiting paranoia, her recent actions, securing her property after discovering her husband's attempt to renovate without her consent and move another person into her home, show appropriate self-protective behavior in response to genuine threats. And these threats, Judge Carson prompted, are they documented? Extensively, Dr. Matthews confirmed. Ms. Harrison has provided me with emails between her husband and his associate discussing plans to redesign her family home without her. Knowledge, forged permit applications, and attempts to access her financial accounts after being removed from the property. Daniel's face had grown increasingly flushed as Dr. Matthews spoke. I could see his fists clenched beneath the table, his lawyer leaning over occasionally to whisper urgently in his ear. Your Honor, Thornton interjected, these alleged threats are simply a husband's attempts to improve a shared residence and access shared resources. Ms. Harrison Harper's interpretation of these actions as threatening further demonstrates her compromised judgment. Judge Carson leveled a measured look at Thornton. Counsel, are you suggesting that applying for construction permits using a forged signature is a normal marital behavior? We dispute the characterization of any signature as forged, Your Honor. Mr. Harper had implied consent as Ms. Harrison Harper's spouse to manage household improvements. I couldn't contain my incredulous scoff, earning a sharp look from Jared. Judge Carson, however, seemed to share my sentiment. Implied consent to forged signatures on official documents? He asked skeptically. That's a novel legal theory, Mr. Thornton. The hearing continued with Thornton attempting to paint Daniel as a concerned husband, while Jared methodically presented evidence of his actual behavior. The forgeries, the unauthorized loan applications, the attempt to transfer my family home into joint ownership without my knowledge or consent. When Jared presented the email exchange between Daniel and Richard discussing plans to renovate Harrison House with no consideration for my wishes or presence, the courtroom grew palpably tense. Claire. Won't be a problem. She never is, Jared read aloud from the email. Trust me, she has no idea what's in the deed. By the time she figures it out, it'll be too late. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact with the judge. His attorney appeared increasingly strained, shuffling papers and whispering urgently to his client. Your Honor, Thornton tried again. These emails are being taken out of context. Mr. Harper was simply trying to shield his wife from the stress of renovation planning given her fragile emotional state. Mr. Thornton, Judge Carson interrupted, his patience visibly waning. I've heard enough about Ms. Harrison Harper's supposedly fragile emotional state. Dr. Matthews has testified convincingly to her client's sound mind and appropriate responses to what appears to be a significant breach of trust. He turned to address both tables. Based on the evidence presented, I'm denying the petition for temporary conservatorship. There is no credible evidence that Ms. Harrison Harper is mentally incompetent or unable to manage her own affairs. Furthermore, I'm granting a temporary restraining order preventing Mr. Harper from entering Harrison House or attempting to access Ms. Harrison Harper's financial accounts pending full divorce proceedings. Daniel surged to his feet. This is absurd. That's my home too. Mr. Harper, Judge Carson warned, control yourself or I'll have you removed. Daniel subsided, but the rage in his eyes was unmistakable. Thornton placed a restraining hand on his arm, murmuring urgently in his ear. Your Honor, Jared said, rising. Given Mr. Harper's documented attempts to forge Ms. Harrison Harper's signature and access her accounts fraudulently, we request financial monitoring be put in place to prevent further attempts. So ordered, Judge Carson agreed. Mr. Harper is prohibited from representing himself as Ms. Harrison Harper's agent in any financial or legal capacity. Additionally, given the serious nature of the forgery allegations, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for review. Daniel's face went ashen. Criminal charges? For trying to renovate my own home? For forgery, Mr. Harper, the judge corrected firmly. And potentially fraud, depending on what the DA's investigation reveals. As Judge Carson delivered his final ruling, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow. This public dismantling of Daniel's character and credibility should have felt triumphant, but instead, it simply underscored the profound betrayal of the past decade. Outside the courtroom, reporters had multiplied, word having spread about the high-profile case unfolding. Eleanor efficiently organized our exit strategy, creating a human barrier around me as we moved toward the private exit where our cars waited. Daniel and his attorney emerged shortly after us, immediately swarmed by journalists. I paused, watching, from a distance as he struggled to maintain his composure under the barrage of questions. Mr. Harper, is it true you tried to move your boyfriend into your wife's family home? Are you facing criminal charges for forgery? Did you really try to have your wife declared mentally incompetent after she caught you cheating? Daniel's carefully cultivated public image was crumbling before my eyes. The polished, successful architect, the charming society husband, replaced by a desperate man caught in his own web of lies. As if sensing my gaze, he looked up, our eyes meeting across the courthouse lobby. For a brief moment, I glimpsed something like realization in his expression, an understanding of exactly how thoroughly he had destroyed everything we might have been. Then, his attorney pulled him away, hustling him toward a side exit to escape the media frenzy. Claire, my father said gently, touching my elbow, let's go home. Home. Harrison House. My house. Secured once more against Daniel's machinations. As our car pulled away from the courthouse, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number, not Daniel's this time, but Richard's. I saw the news. I'm so sorry. For whatever it's worth, he lied to me too. If there's anything I can do to help make this right, please let me know. I showed the message to Eleanor, who raised an eyebrow. Interesting. He seems genuinely remorseful. Or genuinely concerned about his professional reputation, I countered, though without much conviction. Richard had seemed truly shocked by Daniel's deception. Perhaps both, my mother suggested from the front seat. People are rarely one-dimensional in their motivations. My father was less philosophical. The young man participated in an attempt to defraud you, knowingly or not. I wouldn't be too quick to absolve him. I stared out the window, watching the familiar landmarks of the city pass by as we headed back to Harrison House. The morning's anxiety had given way to exhaustion, the adrenaline of the hearing finally fading. "What happens now?" I asked, addressing the question to everyone and no one. Jared, riding in our car, answered practically. "Now we proceed with the divorce. Today's hearing was just the beginning. There will be financial disclosures, possibly depositions, settlement negotiations, or trial if necessary." "And the potential criminal charges?" my mother inquired. "That's up to the DA's office," Jared replied. "The judge's referral gives them a starting point, but they'll conduct their own investigation. Forgery of official documents is a serious offense, particularly when done for financial gain. Will I need to testify?" The thought of reliving this humiliation in a criminal court was almost too much to contemplate. "Possibly," Jared admitted, "though there may be enough documentary evidence to proceed without extensive testimony." My father's phone rang, interrupting the conversation. He answered, listened briefly, then turned to me with a grave expression. "That was Vincent. Daniel just tried to access your office at the Harrison Foundation. When denied entry, he became belligerent, claiming he's on the board of directors and demanding financial records." I shook my head in disbelief. "He's never been on the board. He's attended events as my husband, but he has no official role. Vincent has already notified building security. They're escorting him out now." It seemed Daniel was determined to burn every bridge, to exhaust every possible avenue of attack. His desperation was becoming increasingly dangerous, not physically perhaps, but certainly to my reputation and financial security. As our car turned onto the long driveway leading to Harrison House, I was struck by the sight of my family home bathed in late afternoon sunlight. For the first time in years, it truly felt like mine again. Not a stage for Daniel's performance as the successful architect who had married up, but the legacy my grandfather had built and my father had preserved for me. Eleanor's phone chimed with a news alert. She glanced at it, then wordlessly handed it to me. The headline read, "Architect Daniel Harper accused of forgery and fraud in bitter divorce battle with Harrison heiress." Below was a photograph of Daniel leaving the courthouse, his expression thunderous, his attorney attempting to shield him from cameras. The story outlined the day's court proceedings in surprising detail, suggesting someone had leaked information to the press. "This wasn't us," my father said firmly, reading over my shoulder. "The Harrisons don't fight our battles in the court of public opinion." "Perhaps not," my mother mused, "but neither should we be concerned about Daniel's reputation suffering the natural consequences of his actions." As we pulled up to the house, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked near the security checkpoint, a modest sedan rather than the luxury vehicles Daniel preferred. Marcus approached as we exited our car. "Ms. Harrison, there's someone asking to speak with you." He was quite insistent, though he respected the security protocols and agreed to wait outside the property line. "Who is it?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "A Mr. Richard Wellington. He says it's important." 4 sets of questioning eyes turned to me, my parents, Eleanor, and Jared, all waiting to see how I would respond to this unexpected development. What could he possibly want? My father asked, skepticism evident in his tone. I thought about Richard's text message, his apparent remorse, the shock on his face when he'd learned the truth about Harrison House. "I suppose there's only one way to find out," I said, making my decision. "Tell him I'll speak with him, but here, on my terms, and with security present. Whatever Richard Wellington wanted, whatever new complication he might represent in this unfolding drama, I would face it as I had faced everything else these past few days, with clarity, with dignity, and with the full force of the Harrison legacy behind me. After all, I was no longer Daniel Harper's accommodating wife. I was Claire Elizabeth Harrison, and in my house, on my terms, I would hear what this young man had to say. Richard stood awkwardly in the formal living room of Harrison House, his demeanor worlds away from the confident architect who had arrived. with Daniel days earlier. "I brought these," he said, extending a USB drive. "All the communications between Daniel and me about the renovation plans, and evidence that he falsified firm records to fund our relationship." The revelations were stunning. Daniel had been embezzling from his own architecture firm, misappropriating client funds, manipulating project budgets, all to maintain his facade of success and support his multiple affairs. Richard had discovered the discrepancies while working on the Wellington project. "Why help me?" I asked. "Because I was used to," he replied simply. "Daniel promised me partnership, professional recognition, and yes, a relationship. All built on lies. The evidence Richard provided led to criminal charges against Daniel for fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. His firm dissolved under the scandal. Meanwhile, I rebuilt my life, reclaiming not just my home but my voice and purpose.